We can paint it up into looking beautiful in pink drinks with butterflies and rainbows and all the rest of it. But let's remember, alcohol is ethanol, it is petrol. And no matter how you look at it, it's still a toxin and a poison to the human body. So for a woman, she's very vulnerable to the health risks of alcohol, and particularly when it comes to breast cancer. They've done studies actually, both in the UK and Australia, that show the awareness of the link between alcohol and breast cancer is at about 20%. So 80% of women completely unaware that there's a risk. A recent study that I read showed 35% of hormone positive breast cancer is caused by alcohol.
Well, it's a real pleasure to have Sarah Rusbach to the show today. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
So we got in touch to talk about alcohol and all the things that it does to a woman going through the perimenopause to menopause transition. And you have a very interesting history that got you into the space of gray area drinking, which we're going to discuss what that is as well. So share briefly your story with alcohol.
Yeah, so I had definitely developed a dysfunctional relationship with alcohol the older I was getting. So growing up in the north of England, the standard kind of thing in your teen years was to go down the local park, experiment with alcohol, drink a few beers or ciders or whatever it was. And I definitely noticed at a very early point that I loved the way alcohol made me feel. So whereas some people, I think when they first start experimenting with alcohol, they're a bit like, yeah, don't know, take it or leave it, don't mind. I've got a couple of friends and they would have 2 drinks and then they'd be like, oh yeah, I'm fine to swap to a cup of tea now. Whereas for me, it was always, oh, let's keep going, let's keep going. Alcohol massively lit up that dopamine reward center in my brain. And I was known as Sarah the party girl. And then you start to create this whole persona around that. And so in my 20s, after university, I moved to London. My first job was working in the recruitment industry in the city in banking. And the fourth stage of the interview process was going to a pub to do shots of tequila to see how well you could handle your booze. And that was basically how they decided if you were going to get the job or not. Now, needless to say, I passed with flying colours. This was the late 90s in London. Things were pretty loose back then. I fell into this career that was all about wining and dining. You were kind of getting paid to go and get drunk with clients. And I was just like, oh my God, this is amazing. And I was a really good drunk. So I wasn't someone that was falling over, vomiting, couldn't get out of bed the next day. I had a very high capacity for alcohol. And I didn't get the huge hangovers that some people would get. I was just like, what's wrong with you? Come on, hair of the dog, let's go have a pint the next day type thing. And that carried on through my career in London, working in that industry. I went traveling, I met my husband, we finally got married and we decided to have a baby. And that was when a lot of things changed for me. So in a short space of time, I found myself with 2 kids under the age of 2. We moved from London to Perth in Western Australia. I became a stay-at-home mum. And I'd had a very successful career in London. By this point, I was executive director of the recruitment firm, and I got a lot of fulfillment from it. And I don't think anything really prepares you as a woman for that transition. I was desperate to have a baby. I couldn't wait to be a mum. I was so lucky that I got to have a boy and a girl really close together in age. And so on paper, I had everything that I wanted. We'd moved to Australia. I lived in the sunshine. It was by the beach. I had these 2 healthy kids. We'd saved enough money that I didn't have to work. I could fully be with my children. My husband was setting up a business. But inside, Zora, I was feeling really confused because I was really lonely. I was really homesick. I didn't have any family. I was trying to make new friends, which I was finding really tricky to find people who are the same as you, that you instantly click with. I missed my friends and family, and I missed my job, and I missed that fulfillment that I got through my work. I was suddenly at home all day on my own, changing nappies, going to monkey music, doing baby swimming, pureeing carrots, and dealing with all of these complex emotions, because on one part you're so grateful for what you've got, but on the other part I was sad and I was homesick and I was lonely and I was confused about why I missed my job so much. And all of the emotions were flying around. And the thing about alcohol is it's really bloody good in the short-term moment at making you not have to feel how you're feeling. And this coincided with the real rise at the time in mummy wine culture. Big Alcohol had really started investing in marketing to young mums. I wine, so my mum drinks wine, we're on baby grows. And it was that real era of alcohol being marketed as the solution to mum's issues, to mum's problems, to the tiredness, to the boredom, and all of those things. And so I was, well, of course I'm going to have a drink at 5 o'clock. Every mum's having a drink at 5 o'clock. 5 o'clock is wine time. And, going back to what I'd shared earlier, I liked drinking. It lit me up like a bloody Christmas tree. I definitely had that brain that responded to alcohol. And I slowly but surely started to become, I wouldn't say I was ever physically dependent on alcohol, but I definitely became emotionally dependent. So it became the thing that was like, I'm feeling stressed, have a drink. I'm feeling sad, have a drink. I'm feeling angry, have a drink. Kids have had a really hard day with the kids. It's 5 o'clock, have a drink. And fill in the blank, and alcohol always seemed to be the solution. It never got to the point where I was drinking at home in the day. I wasn't drinking in the morning. I wasn't drinking in the day when I was in charge of the children, but it was something that I was looking forward to more and more come 5 o'clock. It was like, oh, when is it time to open that wine? And generally speaking, once I did, it was kind of hit and miss as to whether it be a glass or a bottle. Like I could never really tell what mood I'd be in, how quickly I would drink. And again, in my 30s, this wasn't hugely problematic. I could easily drink 2 or 3 glasses of wine, get up in the morning, go to the gym, feel okay, deal with the kids. By this point, I was working. I'd set up my own business, working in recruitment, but doing it all from home. And it was probably once I hit 40 that I really noticed the changes in once I started getting into the fluctuating hormones. I noticed the impact that alcohol was having on my anxiety, on my sleep, on my skin, on my energy. And all of these little things started to fit into place where I started to feel like I'm a shadow of the woman that I used to be. And I decided to take a break from alcohol. And during that break, I really noticed the difference of how all those things that had been impacting me disappeared in terms of my sleep improved, my anxiety disappeared, I lost weight, I had more energy, I felt more positive. And over time, I realized that alcohol was exacerbating my perimenopause symptoms. It was exacerbating any anxiety that I had. So 2019, so I've just passed 6 years, I made the decision to remove alcohol from my life. And then, I mean, thank goodness I did it then, because I don't know what I would have been like during COVID if I'd been a drinker in those days. And then I decided to retrain and become a women's health and wellbeing coach, and then a grey area drinking coach, and also a menopause coach. And since January 2021, I've been supporting women all over the world to create successful change around their drinking habits and create emotional regulation tools and a general toolkit for doing life without that reliance on alcohol.
So I'm wondering, you mentioned you weren't dependent physically, but more emotionally on alcohol. What is the difference?
So physical dependence is where we get to, I guess, what the old term would have been alcoholism. The current term is severe alcohol use disorder, but it's where you need to have medical support to safely withdraw from alcohol because your body is actually physically dependent on it. And if you were to suddenly stop, you would die, because alcohol is one of only 3 substances that the human body can die from withdrawal from. The other is heroin, which is illegal, and benzodiazepine, which are pharmaceutical drugs that are only available from a prescribed doctor with a prescription giving ID in a small amount at any one time. Alcohol was listed as an essential service during lockdown. And so it's interesting when we look at it like that. So physical dependency on alcohol means you need to safely withdraw from alcohol in a medical facility where you are being monitored and you are being given the right drugs to support your body to withdraw from alcohol. I was not at that stage. So if we think about gray area drinking, it might be a 1 to a 10 on a scale of someone's drinking. 1 being someone who doesn't drink or maybe has a glass of champagne at a wedding once a year. 10 being someone who has that physical dependency on alcohol and needs safe withdrawal under a medical practitioner to come off alcohol, because people have died from withdrawing very suddenly. Gray area drinking is in the middle. So gray area drinking is probably about a 4 to a 7 on that scale. So it's not people who've reached that point of needing to drink every day and needing support to stop drinking, but it's people who've passed the point of being a take it or leave it drinker. So it's people who've developed, like I had, a relationship with alcohol where we're using it as a crutch of some kind. Some of the signs that you're a gray area drinker would be you often drink more than you intend to. You make promises that, oh, I'm not going to drink this week, but then you find yourself justifying why you're breaking those promises. Gray area drinkers tend to have a lot of rules around our drinking. I don't drink on a Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday. I don't drink white wine on an empty stomach. I don't drink at home on my own unless it's a Friday night. I don't drink at lunchtime unless it's a Saturday and I'm out with friends. Like, alcohol consumption is taking up a lot of headspace for us to justify when and how we drink. Someone who's not a gray area drinker, they kind of don't think like that. They're just like, yeah, do I fancy a drink? Do I not fancy a drink? But gray area drinkers have started getting into that place where they're thinking about alcohol, they're justifying their alcohol. They might find reasons to justify breaking the rules that they've made around alcohol, and they've got that relationship. And then any intentions to create change around their drinking don't usually last. So I could do a dry July, I could do a dry January. I wasn't physically dependent, but as soon as I went back to drinking, it was straight back to where it was before. I didn't create change around my drinking, because gray area drinkers tend to be quite all or nothing. We tend to be quite bingy with our drinking. Or I see women who I work with who are drinking 2 or 3 glasses of wine 5 or 6 nights a week. But society goes, oh, that's only 2 or 3 glasses. That's not that much. That's probably 3 times what the recommended amount is of alcohol. And I would argue that a self-serve glass of wine is nowhere near what an actual unit of wine is. It's probably 2.5 times. So grey area drinkers are generally drinking more than the 10 units of alcohol that is recommended for women.
Recommended. I don't think it's recommended now to drink alcohol. I mean, it's such a funny word because, but it's probably the maximum allowed. Yeah. There must be another word for that, because so we have the people who, I'm not a drinker, but I was like, when you hear the benefits, quote unquote, of red wine, you thought, well, at least back then you thought, oh, well, maybe I should start drinking. So that's kind of a dangerous word, because there are people like that who do think, well, and it's not recommended to drink alcohol. It's just more of a maximum amount that's acceptable or something like that.
It's the recommended units in Australia is 10 for women and 14 for men. And we can come on to why it's different for men and women, and why women physically cannot metabolize alcohol as effectively as men. But the World Health Organization came out last year, Zora, and said there is no safe amount of alcohol. And if you do not want alcohol to damage your health, we recommend no more than 2 units of alcohol per week. 2 units is about 1 glass of wine.
Okay. That's a different way to put it than recommended. Right?
Exactly.
So that's a really smart way. And that makes it more clear. And again, it's a choice. I mean, there's people who drink and they're very conscious of it, and it's their life. It's just to know the consequences and of whatever it is, if it's alcohol or drugs or food or whatever it is, it's fine. But so it's very interesting. Yeah. The physical and the emotional side of drinkers, and classifying them, because it's either you drink or you don't drink in some people's minds, and it's not quite that. And that's why you have this gray area spectrum. And so if I understood correctly, you have on one end of the spectrum, the people who are like, I can take it, leave it, or I don't drink, whatever. Don't think so much about it. And then the other end is the 10. If they were like a 0 to 1 or a 10, and a 10 is is somebody who's clinically has alcohol abuse and cannot control it. And that's a very clear physical thing. And on the other side of the spectrum, I guess there's no emotion real tied to it if you just don't really care about it. And then the emotional drinkers are somewhere in between, like you said, between a 4 and a 7. And that's where you described the gray area. So the other ones are not gray. The other end, 0, I guess, to 4, and then 7 to 10 is you're clearly like this or that. The gray area is 4 to 7, and that you described it really clearly how to identify if you're one of these types of drinkers, and it's justifying it. And that's a really interesting thing, because I didn't realize that, yeah, if you're an alcoholic, you're on the other end of the spectrum, stopping cold turkey is dangerous and you shouldn't be doing that, right? You could die.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
need to keep drinking alcohol, which is like kind of a mind-blowing thing to think about, but that's when you need medical care. You need get proper professional help in weaning yourself off in order to be able, I guess, to not drink forever, right? And we've had this conversation before where I asked you, well, then can a gray area drinker ever get to having a drink once in a while? Because we know if you're in abuse, if you've alcoholism, there's people I've met, it's never.
Yeah. And I would say I have never, ever met a gray area drinker that was able to moderate their drinking.
They always go
Because
back to the default.
it always builds back up. I did 3 months off, I did 4 months off, and I went back to drinking. And it wasn't instant where it was like straight away I'm back to having a bottle of wine, but it was, I'm just going to have a glass, and then, maybe next time I'll have 2 glasses. And then before you know it, it's creeping back up, because as soon as we've created a neural pathway in the brain, I once interviewed a brain specialist who said, if you've created a neural pathway where you've associated alcohol with a solution to stress, it's unlikely you're ever going to be able to moderate your drinking or go back to being someone that just has one every now and then, because the neural pathway then opens up again. We've let alcohol back into our life, and then the brain remembers, and it's like, I'm stressed, I must have that alcohol. Because what we forget is that in the short term, a short-term solution for stress is alcohol, because alcohol is a depressant, shuts down the central nervous system. It makes us feel calm and relaxed in the short term. Long term, it's a nightmare for stress and anxiety. It actually causes more stress and anxiety. But as a short-term solution, it works, and the brain doesn't think, you're going to wake up at 3 a.m. and feel like crap, and you're going to be feeling awful tomorrow, and la la la. The brain goes, that's what makes me feel better when I'm stressed in this moment, so therefore I must drink. And so I would argue that I've not met anyone who has gone from being a gray area drinker to successfully and happily being a moderate drinker.
You mentioned the stress piece. And I remember in a podcast episode with Andrew Huberman, and he was all about, I think this episode went viral, like everyone heard, because it was the zero tolerance piece. And he did mention the person he was interviewing, I think it was somebody he was interviewing. He said that the anxiety piece, people who have anxiety, like you said, they may drink more often to try to calm themselves, but over time, they're making things worse. They're making themselves even more anxious when you're trying to go through life, learning the tools to manage the anxiety. And here it is the reverse. And so that's a really dangerous point. Like you said, you could see you feel calm very short term, but you may not even realize the damage that you're doing later on down the road, especially for those people who are anxious.
Yeah.
And so when we're thinking about menopause and this whole transition, it's stressful. And usually this is women who are in the sandwich generation, right? The sandwich generation are women who are around their 50s. They have aging parents that they have to take care of, and they may still have kids at home. I mean, they're adult kids or they're teenagers. And so they're having to take care of different generations themselves as well. So you can see why this is a really stressful time for many women, and not to even mention all of the symptoms, the 103 symptoms that are possible to have. And so alcohol is very tempting in this moment. I can imagine, like, there's always these stages, like we'll always have an excuse. Like you said, I was having a fun time. I was partying. It was part of my job to drink and get part of this. Then you go through childbearing years and you're having children, you're stressed out. I can't wait for that 5 o'clock drink. And we're always going to find something. And now we're into more stress. So this stress is like always there, but what's happening or what are you seeing in this phase of life, maybe not only with yourself, but the women that you're working with? Do they tend to, we're talking about gray area drinkers, if they tend to drink even more during this period, or is it just continuation of what they've always been doing?
I've got a community of 25,000 women, and I said to them, why do you drink? And majority of them are aged between 40 and 60. And there were three reasons, with the number one being stress. The two other reasons were boredom and loneliness. So you've got a generation of midlife women who are bored, stressed, and lonely. But you can be busy but still be bored, right? Because you're just busy doing all the things for all the people and actually nothing that personally fulfills you or drives your purpose or anything like that. So I find that there tends to be two groups of women once we get to perimenopause. There's the group that go, oh my God, alcohol really is not working for me now. I feel horrendous and sick and awful the next day after I've drank. I can't do it anymore. And they tend to be the people at the lower end of the gray area drinking scale. I find that the women who've probably gone 5, 6, 7 are more likely to be like, alcohol's my solution, it's my crutch. And we know that women who are in perimenopause experience more stress and anxiety. We producing less progesterone, our calming hormone, that leads to a drop in GABA, which is the neurotransmitter that helps us feel calm and relaxed. Interestingly, alcohol causes us to be deficient in GABA as well. So we've got this double whammy going on, but the brain is just looking for the short-term fix of how do I make this, and because the brain sees any kind of stress as threat to our life, and it's looking for survival. The brain's number one job is survival. So the brain is just like, drink, drink, drink. That's what works for me. And so I find that there's two camps, but I find that the women who've been drinking more tend to drink more during these years. And then I find that if that coincides with things like kids leaving home or coming up towards retirement and things like that, that leaves a gap in many women's lives. And that's where the loneliness can sometimes set in and the boredom. So I tend to have two different groups of women that I work with. One is the very, very busy mum, usually, who's raising kids, looking after the parents, working full time, just barely got a moment to herself, and she's using alcohol for stress. And the other is women who are maybe 10 years past that, where they have lost, the kids have left home and are building their own lives. They might not be working or not in a job that gives them that real sense of fulfillment and purpose. They've maybe withdrawn a little bit and they're drinking at home alone a lot of the time as a way to numb out those feelings of boredom and loneliness. But when we look at the perimenopausal women, they tend to be more the ones that are drinking because of stress.
You work mostly with women, but I'm wondering if gray area drinkers, what does it also affect men, and what is the proportion?
It does also affect men, but we know that gray area drinking alcohol use disorder, which would be the mild to mid on the spectrum of the alcohol use disorder spectrum that the clinical and medical profession use, which is gray area drinking, has increased 87% in the last 30 years in women.
Why?
Two reasons. Number one, we know that 30 years ago, the alcohol industry made a realization they were not making enough money from women. And for the first time, they began to segment their marketing and to create drinks and products specific for teenage girls and women, and then create marketing campaigns directed at teenage girls and women. That was when we started getting Alco pops and all of those much more palatable drinks that younger girls liked. They wanted to create brand loyalty from a young age. So Smirnoff and Malibu and all of the brands were creating Alco pops to try and keep brand loyalty from teenage girls all through their lives. So we've got the marketing that became very deliberate towards women that began 30 years ago and has just gone bonkers. And then we've also got that coinciding with women are the most stressed that they have ever been in a generation. In Gabor Mate says it's the most stressful time to be a mother since World War II. in terms of what women are juggling in their life, the relentlessness of got to keep up, working, kids, parents, family, be a good mum, be a good wife, be a good friend, make sure you're doing home cooking, make sure you're volunteering at school, make sure you look good all the time. Are you going to the gym? Are you doing your yoga? Are you meditating? Like, the pressure is relentless, and women behind closed doors are drinking. Because I'll tell you something, Zora, I did one interview with Mamma Mia, which is a big online publication over here in Australia. Within 24 hours, 8,000 women contacted me for help with their drinking and said, "You've just told my story."
Oh my goodness.
Right?
Yes. Yes. I'm so glad you're talking about this. And I've never heard of gray area drinking because I bet a lot of women out there are gray area drinkers, but they don't know they are. And they just say, I'm not an alcoholic. And you're
Totally.
right. They're not
Yeah,
clinically an alcoholic, but it's disrupting their lives. It's disrupting their relationships. It's disrupting their physical health. And if they're interested in protecting their future self and their brain and all the other bits,
absolutely.
then it's time to take a look at the gray area drinking. And that's why I'm having you here, because we haven't spoken about this topic. And I think it's really, really important. So let's talk about what alcohol does then in this phase of life as we're going through menopause, because it seems like, based on your story, and I bet a lot of other people as well, is that you can handle it when you were young, just like anything, we can handle it. And I, as a gerontologist, I always say longevity starts in childhood. Right. If you are interested in having a long, healthy life, then there's things we cannot control, or genetics, or trauma that happens to us. But there are things that we can control, and drugs and alcohol and food abuse, all this stuff starts in childhood and will affect us as we age and go through life. So alcohol, as during this transition, has an impact on our hormones. It has an impact on our physical health. So why don't we break down some of the things that actually happen and then what we can do about it?
Yeah. So there's a few things that happen to a woman as she's aging. So number one, our liver volume shrinks. So the liver's capacity to actually metabolize alcohol and get it out of the body as quickly as possible becomes less capable. So more alcohol is entering a woman's bloodstream as she's getting older. Second thing, there's an enzyme that we produce called alcohol dehydrogenase, ALDH. And this is the enzyme that supports us breaking down alcohol into a substance that can be metabolized and processed through the liver and dumped out of the body. Women produce less of this enzyme than men. And this is why many people of Asian descent cannot tolerate alcohol, because they simply produce, because of genetics, less of this enzyme ALDH. So generally speaking, I know a lot of Singaporean and Chinese ladies, for example, if they have a drink, they get really facially flushed and they feel quite unwell, right? So this is people that cannot tolerate alcohol. So you're just putting your hand up and saying me as well. So that's something that
That's
you've obviously
me. I
experienced.
get all flushed. I'm like, there's something wrong. I
Yeah.
must
So
have that gene.
yeah, so you will have less ALDH. And actually, Dr. Helena Popovich, who's a leading dementia specialist who I've had into my programs as a guest speaker before, she is also cannot tolerate alcohol. It makes her very, very unwell. And we talk about this ALDH. So women have less than men. So if a man and a woman drink the same amount of alcohol, more alcohol enters a woman's bloodstream, making a woman more vulnerable to the health risks of alcohol than a man. So men and women are both susceptible to stroke, alcohol-related strokes, but it will happen 7 times faster to a woman. Men and women are both vulnerable to the liver disease risks and the heart disease risks of alcohol, but it will happen a lot quicker to a woman. And interestingly, women become addicted to alcohol quicker than men. No one talks about this, right? So it's interesting that Australia is one of the few countries that has different recommended limits of alcohol, as we said at the beginning of this podcast, than for men. Not all countries do. I think America, I don't think, has differing amounts. I think or the UK definitely doesn't. So it's interesting that some countries pick up on that. As a woman gets older, her levels of ALDH when she goes through perimenopause begin to decline. So she's got a liver that's shrinking. She's got less of the enzyme that metabolizes alcohol and gets it out of her body. And we've got hormonal changes that mean our gut health is changing. So we know that alcohol is one of the leading causes of leaky gut. Leaky gut is what then can drive autoimmune conditions, inflammation, and many other things. Because at the end of the day, alcohol is ethanol. We can paint it up into looking beautiful in pink drinks with butterflies and rainbows and all the rest of it. But let's remember, alcohol is ethanol, it is petrol. And no matter how you look at it, it's still a toxin and a poison to the human body. So for a woman, she's very vulnerable to the health risks of alcohol, and particularly when it comes to breast cancer. So not many people, they've done studies actually, both in the UK and Australia, that show the awareness of the link between alcohol and breast cancer is at about 20%. So 80% of women completely unaware that there's a risk. A recent study that I read showed 35% of hormone positive breast cancer is caused by alcohol.
How much was that?
35%.
35% of breast cancer is
hormone positive.
Hormone positive is related
Yeah,
or caused by alcohol.
caused by alcohol. And the reason is this. The body needs to metabolize and process and remove estrogen from the body once estrogen's done its job. When estrogen gets to the gut, it's in this packaged parcel that's ready to go into the liver. It gets to the phase 1 liver detox pathway and gets into there, and then it's waiting to go into the phase 2 pathways. If we have a life where we are drinking a lot of alcohol, taking in a lot of fatty food and sugars and caffeine, we're putting products on our skin with lots of chemicals, the human body will always prioritize detoxifying an external substance to something that it's made itself. Because it's kind of like, I know you, I've made you, so I'm going to deal with all of this other stuff first, and then I'll get to you. But imagine these 5 liver detox pathways, that the estrogens come into the liver, it's ready to go down a pathway, but imagine the pathway is like a freeway that's jam-packed with cars that are not moving anywhere because the liver's so busy doing all of its other jobs. The estrogen's sitting there in an altered state because it changes a little bit when it goes into phase 1. All the pathways are clogged up, so the liver's got a trap door that it kind of goes, I can't deal with you right now. You're going to have to go back and circulate around the body again until I've got more time to deal with you. But it's an altered form of estrogen that is now circulating around the body because it's gone into the phase 1 part. So phase 1 part's been done, ready to go down phase 2, but it doesn't get to phase 2. This altered estrogen is not the kind that you want circulating around your body.
And that's whether it's your own estrogen or it's some hormone therapy. It doesn't really matter. And that's something really, really important. And I've met doctors who say, well, I will not prescribe hormone therapy to a woman who is not cleaning up her diet and she's not cleaning up her life, because I know just her own, she's got to metabolize her own estrogen and whatever little that she has left. But now we're going to put in something else. And they're not talking about this. This is really, really important.
I know. I went into a group, Zora, with 140,000 women in a perimenopause group. And I said, how many of you were told when you went on HRT to reduce or cut out alcohol? Not a single one. Nobody.
Yes. So you're honestly putting yourself at risk every time you pick up that glass. And again, we can say the same thing when it's some food that is not working for you, or it's that, I don't know, cigarette, or I don't know, one not that we should be smoking and drinking and eating garbage, but we do take these habits, or putting on creams in our body, and we have these toxins every time. I'm taking a flight today. I'm putting myself at risk just with radiation. So we understand, as long as we know and we're aware, then we can say we have to live our lives. We're not going to live in a cave. So we maybe pick and choose, and all we can do is do our best. Honestly, I'm going to a menopause conference. It's really important for me and my business and everybody else who's listening. I'm not going to not go because of that. So I think when we understand, well, I can offset the radiation. I have a radiation protocol that I'm obviously taking. But once we're aware, we can maybe try to offset, or at least you make those choices. So the woman who's maybe not the gray area drinker, who's now listening to this going, oh my God, I should probably just stop drinking altogether. But then there's that social factor, or there's that occasion, her daughter's getting married, I don't know, for whatever reason, then we can make these conscious decisions and say, okay, I'm going to have that drink or whatever, but we can either offset it or know that we're not going to be doing this every single day. And I don't want to scare women. So yeah, I hate food mongering. I hate all these other things.
No,
So
I agree.
I
Yeah.
do want to put things a little bit in perspective, but I think if you are the gray area drinker who wants to quit, or the alcoholic, these are things like the celiac cannot take gluten. I'm sorry. Like that's the food mongering has to be reserved for those people. But the alcohol, it sounds like this is a bit in the same category. And so the things that you mentioned, I'd like you to repeat them because I think they're quite powerful. You said that strokes, you said 7 times more risk in a woman who is drinking, right? I'm not sure
It
if I
happens
remember
seven
that
times
correctly.
faster.
What?
7 times faster in terms of the alcohol use. So a woman it would drink less and still be vulnerable to all of the health risks of alcohol because her body cannot metabolize alcohol as effectively as a man's. Women are vulnerable when it comes to how much alcohol gets metabolized and removed from our bodies versus how much goes into our bloodstream.
Mm-hmm. Super interesting. Yeah, I think that's an interesting statistic, plus the 35% of those estrogen positive breast cancers being completely due to alcohol. And so this is the real risks of, let's say, breast cancer, right? Alcohol. We're so scared of hormone therapy. And we just had that discussion, like, you certainly don't want to mix these, but when we're so scared of hormones and no, I'm not going to do that, that causes breast cancer, and we're still drinking, it doesn't make any sense to me.
But
So,
it's lack of information. And I think that, like you say, I'm not here to preach. I'm not here to say you must never drink. But what I'm passionate about and what I feel is my purpose is to provide information in a world where so much information is being kept quiet and not being openly shared about the health risks. Because when we have the information, we can make informed decisions. Like, look what happened when we got the information about smoking. Most people quit smoking because they were like, oh, I used to smoke when I didn't know better, but now I know better, so I'm not going to smoke. In 2019, The Lancet published a research paper saying alcohol is in exactly the same carcinogenic category as tobacco. Smoking 10 cigarettes has the same carcinogenic risk as drinking a bottle of wine. And yet you tell someone you've stopped smoking and they'll go, oh, well done. You tell someone you've stopped drinking and they go, oh, don't be so boring. Like it's insane how we perceive alcohol in our society.
and we also may look at the blue zones, for example, or look at France. I mean, my husband's French. I go to France and I see everybody's drinking a glass of wine. Mind you, it's not like the big glass, they're a small, but they're drinking at lunch. They're having a glass of wine and they're drinking every day. It's a big part of the culture. So when you hear headlines like that, or you start to go, oh, you justify your drinking because they do it in France and they're lean, or are they really healthy? Are they really, what's the alcoholism rate there? I don't know, but you may want to look at some of these things and the blue zones. Personally, I don't think they're quite drinking like we are drinking in a gray zone area or an alcoholic.
Yeah,
They're drinking much differently, and it's either for a celebration or it's and it's for me personally, I think the contributing factor to maybe a longer, healthier life is the social factor that they're getting, not the alcohol that they're drinking.
I
It's
would agree.
it's something else, but we like to justify our drinking and say, no, well,
Yeah.
they drink, so why not? So we got to put things into perspective. But I'm going to have just a short moment before I let you go, but I'd love to hit two things. One is, in your experience, and you've helped so many women ditch their gray area drinking, what are the biggest myths about alcohol and menopause that you wish women understood better?
Alcohol will not reduce your anxiety and it will not improve your sleep. And the two biggest differences and I work mostly with midlife women, that they notice is how much their anxiety reduces and how much calmer they feel once they've changed their drinking, how much better they sleep. But also, Zora, do you know what I see happen day in, day out, which is the best part of my job? When grey area drinkers change their drinking, they start to grow in confidence. They start to grow in self-belief. They start to grow in their attitude and having that hope, and they start creating bigger, more fulfilling lives. Because if most people don't drink enough that they're feeling hungover and sick in bed all day, but they're drinking enough, because even one drink will impact your sleep and negate your REM sleep, which, as we know, has such an impact on many other areas of life. And so if you're not sleeping well and you've got low level anxiety from just drinking a couple of drinks 4 or 5 times a week, you're never going to feel your absolute best. And particularly in perimenopause, when the body is already working so freaking hard to deal with all of the other changes, you throw a toxin like alcohol in, and it really does not support you. And the biggest thing I see is the night sweats, for example, the hot sweats, the hot flushes, all of those things massively reduce as well. So while we might go, oh, I need a glass of wine to relax and unwind, try a month off booze and notice what the difference is to your stress levels. And I'm pretty sure you'll notice that they've reduced.
As an expert in gray area drinking, what are 3 tips that help women create a fulfilling alcohol-free life?
We've got to create, number one, create a fun plan. What am I going to do for fun that doesn't revolve around alcohol? Because most of us have that myth and that idea that the only way to have fun is drinking. And most of us have surrounded ourselves with other gray area drinkers. And so that's how they also want to have fun. So number one would be create a fun plan. Fun for me now is getting up at 5 a.m. and going for a sunrise hike. Fun is going and doing a jigsaw with my daughter and having that moment in time. Like, fun is not just getting dressed up and going out and getting drunk. Fun is doing anything you do for your own enjoyment and pleasure that has no other purpose than something that you enjoy doing. So create a fun plan. Number 2 would be make sure you are giving your body the nutrients that she needs to support your mental, physical, and emotional well-being. Most gray area drinkers are not eating that great. They're impacting their gut health, like Andrew Huberman's podcast on alcohol, incredible. And he said, number one thing, if anyone out there is drinking alcohol, you need to be having fermented food every single day, because what alcohol does to your gut health is a nightmare. And so if you're coming off the booze, like, you want to feel your best, nourish your body with the nutrients and really work on that. And number 3, I don't know a single person who has successfully removed alcohol and exercise did not play a part in that. We have got to make sure we're getting natural dopamine hits, and starting your day with some form of exercise gives you that dopamine. And then the body's not searching for it through alcohol or sugar, because I find lots of ladies quit alcohol and swap that addiction for sugar because they're looking for something to create that dopamine hit. Get your natural dopamine hits, eat well, get sunlight, move your body, bit of cold water therapy. Some of these things are brilliant protocols to make sure that we're not just taking the dopamine hits away and doing nothing else.
Fabulous tips. All right. Create a fun plan, nourish your body, and exercise. It's the trifecta for everything.
Right.
So before I let you go, why don't you tell us a bit about your book and the programs or any events that you have coming up?
Yeah, so I work with women all over the world. I'm from the UK, live in Western Australia, work with women in the US, Canada, Europe, the UK, and all over. So you can go to my website, sarahrussbach.com. But if this podcast has piqued your interest, if you're curious and you want to dive in and know a little bit more, the best place to start is get a copy of my book, Beyond Booze: How to Create a Life You Love Alcohol-Free. And in the book, I take you on a real journey. And I get messages, hundreds of messages every week from women telling me it's changed their life. It gives you the practical tools and tips for creating change and what we need to add in when we're taking alcohol out. But I also go into a lot more detail about grey area drinking. I share a lot of my story, and there's a lot of tools and resources available in the book as well. And otherwise, follow me on Instagram, which is just at Sarah Russbach. I'm always posting on there, offering lots of tools and resources and lots of sober support.
Well, you must get so much fulfillment in the work that you do.
It just, honestly, Zora, if you'd told me 6.5 years ago that this would be my life, I just wouldn't have quite believed it. But every day I wake up to messages from women all over the world telling me that the impact of my story or my work, or from working in one of my programs, I run women's alcohol-free challenges 4 times a year, that how much it's changed their life, and not just their life, but it changes their kids' lives. I got a letter from one of my clients' 13-year-old son, and he said, "Dear Sarah, thank you for giving me my mum back."
Oh, oh my
And you
gosh, I
know,
got tears welling up.
it's
Amazing. You've
it's
got a real pain to purpose story yourself.
and it's so important that we understand the role modeling effect that our drinking will have on the next generation. Monkey see, monkey do. And if our kids only ever see us socialize getting pissed, and see us every time we see our friends, we're getting drunk, then they just create that belief, oh, as an adult, the only way to have fun and to socialize is with alcohol. Whereas my kids see me go dancing, they see me go raving, they see me go to barbecues and weddings and birthdays and everything with my glad rags on, all dressed up, coming home sometimes at midnight. Very rarely. I'm very rarely a midnight girl, but sometimes. And they know that you can do it without booze. You don't need that alcohol there. And I'm so grateful. My son said to me the other day, "Oh, Mum, I was so glad that you were able to come and pick me up from that party." He's 15 and a half. Because my mate's mum, she was too drunk to come and get him. So he had to get an Uber home.
Wow. Yeah. You cleaned up your act just in time.
Oh, totally,
Yes.
totally.
But it's never too late. It's never too late. And if anybody wants to reach out to you, I have links to your website, to the book, to your social media in the show notes. Please go to that. Thank you so much, Sarah, for your time. I appreciate it and all the work that you're doing. I know it probably was not an easy journey, but you did it. And now you're impacting thousands and thousands of women. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.